There's just not ever enough. But one of my passions in leading volunteers is building a culture that is volunteer friendly, because I believe that recruitment is important, but I believe loving and treating those volunteers well helps both ends of that. I think that our role and responsibility is to love these volunteers, create a volunteer friendly culture so that number one, they are free to do what God has called them to do. And number two, we're not having to recruit so much on the other end of it if they're loving where they are and staying where they are. And so that's what I want to dig into with you guys over the next little bit, is what that looks like. Now, Mark, we have till what time do I need to stop talking? 1?
Noon. No, noon. Oh wait, you're in a different time zone.
So noon your time. I just made everybody very nervous, didn't I?
They're like, oh, I'm going to go get my lunch.
No. Okay. I'm an hour ahead. So 12 your time.
I'm going to record this. I hope that's okay.
Oh, yeah. You're fine.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So let's dive into it then. I promise I do not have that many words. Let's look at some basic needs of volunteers. So you have all these people that have said yes, whether you've drug them in or they've come willingly or however you got them there. Let's look at some of their basic needs. Number one, volunteers need to enjoy what they're doing, right? So I know there's commitment to this. I know that there is, for a lot of you, you're requiring some volunteers to be there, whatever. However they got there, they need to enjoy what they're doing. And there's some questions that you can ask with that. Does their job fit? God has shaped each of us to be exactly who we are. Have you put them in the right job for them? So, for example, if you have a very introverted person who is in charge of greeting everybody, that may not be a great fit, right? If you have that super highly energetic person sitting, maybe rocking babies, that may not be the best fit for them. So are you helping people figure out God's gifting, what their personality is like, what they enjoy doing, and are they fit together with the right role for them? You know, another thing to consider as you're looking at do they enjoy what they're doing is who are they serving with? Years ago, I had a lady, sweet lady, that we had recruited to work with babies, and she loved it. She was passionate about it. She loved loving on those little ones. And she was one of those that after a while kind of drifted off, like didn't show up for a week and didn't show up the next week. And so I followed up with her and she said, oh, Jenny, I love the babies. I love being in there. I love serving these families, but the people you got me with. And I just kind of smiled and laughed because she was super extrovert. The people she was with were not super extrovert. So she wanted to sit in there and talk and get to know them. And they really just wanted to rock the babies. And so it created a not very enjoyable experience for her simply because we had not done a good job partnering people together. And then third, how many frustrations are they encountering? I get and I know and I believe that scripture says we are to take up our cross and follow Jesus. I know that serving is not always going to be a happy circus with rainbows and unicorns. But if our people are feeling like they're having to take up their cross every single day to walk into the classroom we've assigned them to, we might are not doing something right. If they're encountering continual frustrations, like every week they're having to talk to you about the exact same thing and it's never getting fixed. If they have multiple things, the heat's wrong in the room and we don't have the diapers we need, or we don't have the lesson plans in time, if they're continually encountering frustrations, they're not going to enjoy where they are. And that's one of the basic needs for volunteers. Everybody good? Everybody hanging with me? Am I talking too fast?
No, it's good.
Okay. All right. Second, volunteers need to know that they're meeting a need. This is hard for us to get sometimes because we know how much we need them. Like we are praying for them to show up, right? We know we need them, but sometimes they don't see the why. So number one, do your volunteers know the value of why they're there? If you have somebody who is an assistant in a classroom, do they get why there needs to be a second person in that room? Do they understand why they need to be helping that teacher? Do they know the value of why they're changing diapers every week? Have you helped cast that vision for them? And I would say, and not to be like sexist, but I think men especially have to know why you need them there. So men in the room, I hope that's not offensive to you, but I think that's true. I think men need to really feel like there's a reason for them to be there and be part of the ministry. We have a great guy who was serving with our younger threes, was doing a great job. The littles love him. He's waiting to give them high fives as they're coming in the room. Well, the next fall, we didn't need that class, just the way that our classes broke up and our age groups broke up. So we combined 2 sets of teachers. And so that gentleman and his wife were combined with somebody else. And after about 6 weeks, I had noticed that wife was still coming and serving. Husband was becoming more and more infrequent in showing up. And so finally I asked what was going on. Probably should have asked sooner. And they said, oh, well, he doesn't really feel like he needs us. There's several of us in this room. He feels like he doesn't need to be here. And to me, I was celebrating, hey, we've got extra adults in this room. We have instant backup if anybody has to be absent. We're totally covered. We don't have to worry about this room every week. But in his mind, he thought, there's extra adults. I don't need to be here. I can just kind of slip out. So I think we've got to continually communicate the value, especially to the men in our ministries. Cast that vision continually and cast it clearly. You are not just changing a diaper. You are ministering to this family, helping these parents be able to go to church. They're entrusting you with their littles. You are in this nursery, and you are laying the very first foundation of what church looks like to these kids. Or you being here consistently helps this 5th grader build relationships with you. Thank you for that. So continually casting that vision. Share stories with your volunteers. Help them know. Like, one example is baptism. If you have a 4th grader getting baptized, maybe you can take the opportunity to share that with your nursery workers, with your toddler teachers, with your preschool volunteers, whoever comes before that, helping them see that all of them had a part of that 4th grader being baptized. Help them see that there's value in what they're doing, even if they don't see it every single moment of every single week. And then number 5, notice when they're missing. You heard me tell the story that took me a couple weeks to follow up with Mr. Ricky, who hadn't been showing up in his classroom. That's a dropped ball on my part. Some volunteers, maybe it's just in Florida, maybe it's just at my church, that volunteers can sometimes start to disappear. We've got to catch that right away. Sometimes we don't want to feel like we're hounding them, but let's notice when they're missing, and that communicates to them that we need them as well. Volunteers need to feel respected. And this is another one of those that none of us would intentionally disrespect a volunteer, but let's look at some things that we can evaluate regarding that. Number 1, demonstrate intentional respect. We get so busy on Sundays or Wednesdays or whenever your ministry time is that sometimes we end up being rude and we don't even know it. Like, let's take the time to make sure we're looking our volunteers in the eye. Let's finish conversations with them. Let's show them the respect that they deserve. Do we become the taskmaster on Sunday mornings? Hey, I need you to do this. I need you to do this. Don't forget this. Rather than taking the time to talk to them like they're a real person and not just somebody who's there to do the things we need them to do. In that, let's use our manners. Sorry, this sounds very preschoolish, but we get so busy. Let's not forget to say please. Let's not forget to say thank you and to treat them with the respect that they deserve. One great way we can show we respect our volunteers is to ask for their opinions and for their input. As even those grumpy ones that you don't really, you get enough of their opinions, ask them. The people who are serving in these classrooms are the ones who are the experts, right? We may be the leaders of the ministry, but they're the ones that are in the trenches. And so let's ask for their opinion and their input on things that are going on. And then finally, return emails and calls. It is such a strange world. And I know that you call and email your volunteers and they never respond to you or never read what you say. I get that. I'm living that too sometimes too. But they definitely want us to return to answer them when they contact us, right? So let's show respect to our volunteers by getting back with them as quickly as we can. Another need is that volunteers need to be comfortable. So what does that mean? So number 1, they need to be safe. We need to make sure that we're putting them into environments that is not putting them in any kind of danger. So what does that look like? We make sure that we have our ratios right. We don't have one volunteer in a room with 23-year-olds, right? That's not a safe place. We make sure that we have good child protection policies in process. I know at our church, and I hope in yours, that we stress we never have an adult alone with children for their protection. We want to make sure that we are training them in ways to keep kids safe and to keep them safe as well. Number two, I put multi-sensory. So we want the places, the environments, the physical environments where they serve to be comfortable in lots of ways. Like, we don't want it to stink. All right, can we be honest? I'm in a 50-year-old building, and there are days that we walk into a room or the hallway and we cannot figure out what that smell is. But if my volunteer is in that room every single Sunday smelling that smell and we're not doing anything about it, that's not helping them. That's not meeting their needs. You know, and maybe the temperature. Again, we're in an old building. Some weeks it's like 20 degrees below zero in that room. Some weeks it's super hot. We've got to address those things as much as we can. I know we are limited in what we can do with our building, but we got to think through the whole experience for our volunteers. Are they comfortable temperature-wise? Are they comfortable with the smells and with what's going on in the room? Are we keeping the room clean? All those kind of things. Let's just make sure we're not putting our volunteers in a gross situation. This is just flat out practical, y'all. I hope that's helping somebody. And then number three is we've equipped them. So if you stop for a minute and think about the things that we ask some of our volunteers to do, they are things that maybe professional teachers have trained and gone to college and have spent hours and hours and hours and years preparing for. Things like classroom management, things like teaching children in engaging ways, dealing with and teaching special needs children. These are huge things, and it's our responsibility to help teachers feel comfortable in these classrooms by equipping them as much as we can in those areas. So those are some basic needs. We're going to dive into a lot more stuff, but those are the things that I just wanted to emphasize first, that we've got to make sure that our volunteers know that they're needed, that they are in a job that fits for them, that they know that they're respected, and that they are comfortable where they are. Something else that I think plays a big role into a volunteer-friendly culture is what our leadership layers look like. I know a lot of times, so when I say layers, I mean different levels of leadership. And most of the time, to be real honest, in children's ministries, whether it's a big ministry or a small ministry, what we end up with is the leader and then all those other people. And I think that can be pretty dangerous in different ways. And I'll express that in a minute. But I think to build a volunteer-friendly culture, you need different layers of leadership. So let's talk through those layers for a minute, and then we'll talk about why that's important. So as we go through these, think about what exists within your ministry. Number one, I believe we need some entry-level positions, some entry-level places in our ministry. So maybe this is somebody greeting at the door and giving high fives. Maybe these are some men who are security for us and just hang out on the hall just in case we need something. Maybe it's somebody who takes attendance, or I don't know, you can fill in the blank with what that looks like. But who this can be filled by are those people who maybe are really ready, thinking they might be ready to serve, but they're not so sure they're ready for that commitment. This gives them an ability to see what all's going on in the ministry. Or maybe it's somebody who's really ready to serve, or really thinks they're ready to serve. You don't know them very well, or you're not so sure about it. By putting them in this kind of position, it gives you the chance to observe them and see what they might be able to bring to the table and where the best fit might be for them. We strive very hard to have an assistant in every classroom, and you probably do too, but just somebody that is not just helping out the teacher, but is learning what to do and can hopefully be the next teacher in the future. And then we have our leaders, which is the common level that most of us have, right? This 5th grade teacher, the worship leader in children's worship, the lead nursery volunteer. And then another place where we're missing these levels a lot of times are these high capacity leaders. So I said earlier, a lot of times it's leader and then everybody else, which what that sets us up for as leaders is our ministry is going to be capped where our capacity is. Like, there's only so much I can do. And so I believe part of my job in creating a volunteer-friendly culture is to allow God to equip other people to take really big chunks of the ministry, whether that's a director who oversees all of our Sunday school teachers, whether that's somebody who takes over large group teaching for a worship time, whether it's somebody that I'm sharing the load of leadership with. So I'm not the only one with the answers. I'm not the only one making the decisions. There are other people who are equipped to do basically what I'm doing. Jim Weidman says, I'm trying to work myself out of a job, right? I'm trying to give other people parts of this ministry so that it's not just about me, because I don't want our leadership or our growth to be capped at what only I can do. So how does this help a volunteer-friendly culture? Is that there's a place, number one, there's a place for everybody. Whether it's somebody who's pretty new to the church, whether it's somebody who's highly, highly gifted in management skills, whether it's somebody who's just a great teacher and that's all they want to do. There's a place for everybody. There's also potential for you. Lifeway has a great thing out right now called Leadership Pipeline, where you have an intentional process for moving somebody from that entry level to help them become an assistant, to then help them move up to wherever God has them to be. So you're being intentional about replacing people and having people move up and learn more. And I really think this adds a lot of value into our volunteer culture, because it gives people a good place to start. It gives them a good process for moving forward. And it keeps it from being just us and a whole bunch of people, right? And it helps us do what God has called us to do in equipping others. Let's look at some hard questions to ask about your own volunteer culture. So number one, is it fun to serve here? Is fun overrated? I hope that you don't think that if you're in children's ministry. So there's difference between manufactured fun and, oh, I went too far. There's difference between manufactured fun and just genuine fun. Manufactured fun is, hey, we're gonna have a day where we have bubbles on the hallway. Or I was at a place one time where the preschool did a fake snowball fight. And that is so fun. That creates a fun environment. But as far as your volunteers are concerned, are they genuinely enjoying being there? That kind of goes back to one of those basic needs. Do they enjoy what they're doing? And how can you tell if it's fun to be in your ministry? Do you walk up and hear volunteers laughing together like just nobody made them, right? Nobody manufactured that fun. Do you see people smiling? Do you see people interacting with each other? If you were a stranger and walked onto your hallway and observed your volunteers, would you think, man, this is a fun place to be? Or would you think, oh, those people look like we're torturing them, right? So just being honest here, just being real. But that is a great, very simple place to start is, are our volunteers having fun doing what they're doing? And does it matter? I really, really think that it does. And I hope that you do too. God has given us this amazing ministry of serving the most fun people on the planet, right? We are not serving, well, I won't say anything. I don't want to offend anybody, but I'm sure coffee ministry has its own fun, right? But coffee ministry is not going to say the weird things that preschoolers say. We get to be in the very most fun place, and that needs to be exhibited through what's coming out on your volunteers' faces. So number two, do I balance high expectations with flexibility? I believe we need high expectations to help bring excellence into our ministry. I believe we have to have high expectations as far as what our kids are learning. We need high expectations for how our volunteers interact with them. But at the same time, they're volunteers. They're not our employees. And so we have to be really careful that we are not being controlling. We have to be careful that we're modeling grace to them, because they are going to mess up. They are going to forget to call in. They are going to get sick or go on vacation, right? Crazy thought. But we need to balance our high expectations with lots of grace and lots of flexibility. So we do want excellence, but we've got to love our people. We can't have excellence at the expense of loving our people. Let's look at the third question. Do we make it hard to serve? So in order to start serving in your ministry, is it easier to apply for a car loan than it is to apply to serve? Like we need those high expectations. We need the applications. We need the background checks. Those should be non-negotiable. But are we making it hard to even start serving? If somebody wanted to serve in your church right now, do they know how? Like, is it easy for them to get to you? I know you feel like you're going around begging everybody, come on, come on. But what if that new person is out there? Is there an easy path for them to come and serve for you? Once they're serving for you, are there barriers to making, are we creating frustrations? At my former church in Alabama, we realized that most of our volunteers worked full time, and we were asking them each week to come in and have a lesson, spend lots of time preparing a lesson, to come in and to have all their supplies together. They were in charge of that. They were in charge of letting us know what kind of copies they needed. And then they got in this room with 10, 15 kids, and they had to do classroom management. They had to teach in an engaging way. Oh, and by the way, we want them to build relationships with the kids and to interact with them outside of class. And those are all good things, but that was a lot. And so at that church, we kind of split some of those responsibilities. We had 2 people in the room. One was in charge of teaching, one was in charge of relationships. And that's just one example. But our people don't do this full time, right? They're not full-time children's ministry volunteers, most of them. What can we do to make it easier for them? Again, I know take up your cross and follow Jesus. We know that our job is not to make serving just super, super easy. But what barriers can we remove where we're not making it too difficult? We don't want to remove the challenge. We just want to remove the barriers that are making it hard to serve. All right, question number 4. Do volunteers get the recognition that they deserve? Should they be doing it and serving for recognition? Absolutely not. Should we recognize what God's doing through them? Absolutely. So how do you show appreciation to your people? Sometimes we get frustrated. Sometimes we get jaded and we get caught into, I'm working so hard. Don't they know that they're appreciated? Don't they know I'm just glad they showed up. Yeah, maybe. But what can we do to be better at recognizing them? A lot of you are probably really good at maybe the candy bars with the little notes. You've seen all that, or if you haven't, there's 100 different ideas on Pinterest. Those kind of trinkets are good, and I like them and I love them. But what can we do to make them genuinely feel recognized and appreciated? A couple things are, we can do all those things we've already talked about, right? We can make sure we know that they know that they're valued and that their role is important. We can take care of the environment that they're in. Those are the very most important things, I feel, to them feeling appreciated. But what are some ways that you can make them feel like rock stars? Several years ago, we did a volunteer recognition time. It was a recruitment time, of course, because every minute is recruitment time. But we also used it as a time to recognize the volunteers that we have. And we did a theme based on rock stars. In Philippians, it talks about you shine as brightly as the stars. And that was a terrible translation of that, but you can look it up. I don't have it right here in front of me. And we did, as part of that, we did like Hollywood stars. We did stickers that looked like the stars on the sidewalk in Hollywood. And we picked out some volunteers and put their names on it. And Jimmy had been serving in our special needs classroom for years and years and years. Super quiet. Hardly anybody knew him, but I wanted to put Jimmy's name on that star. You would have think that we literally sent Jimmy to Hollywood. When he saw it, he came just huge smile, just so excited. And probably for 6 weeks, every week, he thanked me, Miss Jenny, thank you so much for that star. That just means so much. Why did it mean so much? Because we were recognizing what he was doing every single week. Would Jimmy have kept doing it, even if he didn't get a sticker with a star with his name on it? Of course he would. But God used us to encourage him by recognizing what he had been doing. You can recognize your volunteers by bragging on them every chance that you get. When you're in front of your pastor or you're in front of leadership at your church, if you get the chance, be intentional. They're not going to ask you. They may not ask you, but be intentional about bragging specifically on volunteers. Make sure that they're getting the credit. If something goes well, name the leaders and the volunteers that had a big part of it. We don't seek recognition for ourselves, I'm sure, but sometimes it's easier to let people think we did it all. Let's instead push all of that recognition towards our volunteers. All right, next. Do they have all the things? Children's ministry requires so much stuff, right? Like all the crayons and all the baby wipes and all of the stuff. So something to ask for about your volunteer culture is, this is so basic, do they just have the stuff that they need, right? Do you have clear processes for requesting items that they need? Like if they know they're out of crayons in their room, how do they let you know that? Is it just telling you in the middle of the hall? I hope that works for you. For me, I have started telling people, do not tell me things on Sunday. I will never remember. But we have a little box where you can write down a note and stick it in the box, and we'll take care of it this week. Do you have a process for once they request those things, how do you fill it? So make sure that you've determined the who, the what, the when, the how for how people get their stuff. And respond quickly. Ask what they need. Be intentional about making sure they have all the things that they need, and make sure that you have a process for figuring that out. All right, next. Everybody with me? Y'all still good?
Oh yeah, it's good.
Okay. Do volunteers know what's going on? So in this day and age, we have a million different ways that we can communicate with people, right? And what seems to be happening is, even though we have Facebook and Twitter and we have text and we have email and we still have a phone, even though we have all of those ways, people still don't know what's going on. And isn't that super frustrating? But it's still our job to do everything we can to communicate with our people. So we want to use as many methods as possible to communicate the important stuff. So if you are that person that's forwarding 9,000 super happy stories to your volunteers, they're probably not, and I mean, like, you know, like the email goofy forwards or the Facebook stories or whatever, they're probably not going to pay attention when you email and tell them there's an important meeting they need to be at. So we want to over communicate the things they need to know. We want to under communicate the stuff that really doesn't matter. So we want to make sure that we are never assuming that volunteers know what's going on inside our heads, right? We can continually communicate, make sure they know what's going on. As soon as we are tired of hearing ourselves, and as soon as we're tired of communicating things, people are starting to hear it for the very first time. So make sure that you're not only explaining the what's, but the whys. Here's why we're meeting. Here's why we're making this change. Communicate, communicate, communicate. All right, next. Are our systems broken? So what is happening in your ministry over and over again that you really wish wasn't? That's a broken system. So years ago, I was at a camp with a bunch of kids. We're in the cafeteria, and they're handing out frozen pancakes for the kids for breakfast. And I thought, okay, that's cool. So I walk into the main cafeteria, and there's one microwave. So literally 2,000 kids, one microwave, frozen pancakes. And so I'm standing in this line, about to lose my mind, and finally just kind of take over and start taking everybody's pancakes, throwing them all in the microwave at once. And another leader laughed and said, you know, we had this exact same problem last week. And I thought, oh, that is a broken system, right? When we are continually doing the same thing and we don't like how it's turning out. So examine in your ministry, what keeps happening over and over again that you wish wasn't. Complaining about it, blaming others, whining about it isn't going to fix the system. You've got to figure out, identify what it is, because if you're frustrated about it, so are your volunteers. Maybe it's substitutes. We don't ever have the substitutes we need. People are out, people are sick, and we can't fill that in. That's a broken system if it's happening, if that's a continual frustration. Figure it out, brainstorm, ask people for their input, and fix those things that keep happening over and over again. Next question is, where is the loyalty? So what I mean by this is, as you're investing in these volunteers, are you building a kingdom unto yourself? Like, are you wanting them to love Miss Jenny's ministry and love serving for Miss Jenny? If I'm doing that, I am totally missing the mark. My job is to build loyalty to Christ and to serving God and his kingdom, and then to serving the church as second to that. I had the privilege of going back to my former church in Alabama just a few weeks ago. I hadn't been back in 5 years to a service. And as I was walking through the kids' hall with their leader, I was so excited to see so many people still serving. They had gone through the change of a children's pastor. They had gone through the change of senior pastor. And so many of them were still on that team. And I was so proud of them because their loyalty was in serving kids and serving God. And that wasn't anything that I did. If I did, it was by accident. But it just really reinforced to me the importance of us helping our volunteers build that loyalty to God first, and us not building our own little kingdom. How would we do that accidentally? Is by venting to them about other staff members or about the pastor, by communicating verbally or non-verbally things that we're frustrated about in the church, by bringing their attention to children's ministry, making children's ministry the most important thing, rather than the church as a whole. Those are just a few examples. Next, do we celebrate well? God is doing things in your ministry, and it is so easy to just focus on the things that are broken or the things that are frustrating. But when God is doing big things, how do you celebrate that? Do you celebrate baptisms big time? Do you celebrate that, hey, we all survived the end of the year, or we all survived VBS? Party with your volunteers. Have a great time with them. This kind of goes back to that fun culture. give them food. Food is I think everybody's love language for celebrations. Surprise them with donuts or with ice cream, whatever. But what opportunities do you have where you can celebrate what God is doing? Spoil them a little bit. You are their leader. Spoil them and make them feel super appreciated. Next, are people serving out of fulfillment or out of obligation? So I get asked a lot if we require parents to serve in our children's ministry, and I don't. And I get asked a lot by our leaders, why don't you make parents serve? And this question is the exact reason, is I want people who are in the classrooms who want to be there and want to be with those kids and who God has called to be there. I don't want people who are just there because I made them. Like, you had a kid, now your punishment is to serve in the nursery. Because what are they going to do? They're going to sit in that rocking chair and kind of be a bump on the log, and they are not going to be, for the most part, are not going to be invested and investing in those kids. So if that is your system, I would just challenge you to figure out, is there a way to bring fulfillment along with that obligation? And if that's something you're questioning whether you do or not, all I can speak to is why we don't. Is I don't want just names on a spreadsheet. I want people who are in their role that God has called them to be. All right, next, maybe last question is, do your volunteers come back? As you're evaluating your volunteer culture, this is a huge question to ask. If every year at the end of the church year, or however you do it, if you're having to recruit 50% of your team back, then something's wrong. If you are celebrating, if you are meeting their needs, if you're making sure they got their stuff, most of your volunteers are going to come back if you have a volunteer-friendly culture. Yes, there are going to be people who want to go serve somewhere else, or people who move, or people who just need a break. We had 5th grade teachers who served for 10 years or something who just took a break, and that's totally fine. When they do that, how do you respond to that? That's another question too to evaluate for yourself. You help people leave well in a way that they will come back at some point. Are you providing a culture where people want to stay and be a part of it? And then maybe this is the last question. Would I want to serve in my own ministry? Like, for real. If you weren't being paid, or if you had not signed up for life, or whatever you've done, if you came to your church, would you want to serve in the ministry that you're leading? That's a hard but pretty genuine question to ask. So what now? So we've looked at basic needs. We've looked at leadership layers that we could and should, I think, have within our ministry. We've looked at hard questions to ask. What do we do? So what if we've asked those questions and we don't like the answers? So first, identify the areas that need improvement. You can't do it all, right? We come back from conferences or from meetings or whatever, and we have this list of 97 things that we want to fix. Maybe just start with 1 or 2. Of the things that we've talked about, did God prompt your heart to a couple of things that you feel you could do better? And prioritize. That's what I was just talking about. You can't do it all. So what do you need to start with? What is the lowest hanging fruit? Like, what could you change really easily? Or what's the biggest thing that's causing the most problems that you need to change? Next, identify steps. If this has been a problem or a broken system in your ministry for a while, you probably just can't automatically like snap your fingers and make it better. What are the steps you need to do to change, to improve in that area? And then finally is keep evaluating, keep improving. Because you know as well as I do, children's ministry is like this living creature that is always changing. We've got to keep it. So once you've got one thing figured out, something else is going to break, kind of like whack-a-mole. So we want to keep evaluating and keep improving. Make it a constant part of your culture to be thinking about, what can I do to make my culture more volunteer friendly? How can I do that? How can I better serve my people? And keep working at it. Y'all have a very hard job. Any of us that are serving kids, serving families, serving in ministry do. But I know that you know that it's totally worth it. And so let's evaluate our culture and our ministry, and let's figure out what we can do to make it the very best experience that we can for the people that God has put in our care. So here are a few ways that you could contact me. I love people, and I love connecting with people in ministry, and I would love to hear what God is doing in your world. I would love to hear what you would change in all this that I just talked about, what you would add to it, or what didn't make any sense. So please, please, please feel free to connect with me in any of these ways, and I would love to do that. So I appreciate you guys listening. I'm going to see if I can figure out how to see you again. There you are.
All right. Let me see if I can get where we can see better too. Okay, very good. See if I can make it larger. Okay, there you are.
Hi.
All right. Very good. Okay, we have just a few minutes if anybody has a question. Would that be okay, Jenny?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Okay, great.
I'm just glad to see people. I felt like I was talking to myself for the past 30 minutes, which is a little weird.
That's still a little weird. Sorry.
No, it's me. It's my technical lack of tech.
Oh, okay. I thought I had it pointed to a few people. Okay. Any questions or thoughts? Maybe something that you heard that you want to affirm that was a really good point. Look over the notes. We were writing feverishly because it was so good.
And I talk way too fast.
No, it's good. Stacy.
I was actually in your conference.
Hi.
I wrote furiously the first time, so it was good to hear you again so I could just sit and
It's so
take it in and not worry about writing it down. So you were spot on. Thank you.
It's good. Very good. Anybody else?
I have a question.
All right.
Moving a leader, we're talking about the volunteer layers of entry level, assistant leaders, and then high capacity. I have difficulty moving leaders to a high capacity leader position because of the time constraints. Could you address that and how to handle that?
Could you hear all that?
Just bits and pieces. Would you mind repeating it for me?
No problem. So he is asking about identifying people who are high capacity and moving them into a different role, but the time constraints that are so challenging. So how would you address that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if I understand, you're asking, there are people who you know have the capability to do it, but there are also those people that are super busy and they have jobs and lives, and right? Is that kind of where you're going with that?
Yes, they're already successful in other areas.
Right. Right. So that's a great question, and that is a great challenge. I think one of the best ways to work with that is through relationship. Sorry, I couldn't tell if I was talking over you. Is ask God to show you those people, identify who they are, and become their very best friends. And the more you can infuse passion into them for what's going on, the more we all make time for what we're excited about and interested in, right? And so the more we can help them catch the passion for ministry and what they're doing, the more they're going to be willing to give. On the flip side of that, we don't want to create this high capacity job that's going to be a 40-hour job, because that's not fair to anybody, especially since we're not paying them. But what role can they do when they're there? Like, they're going to give you an hour on Sunday morning. Okay, what can they do? What can you take off of your plate that you can trust with them that's not going to be a 40-hour thing? What can they do in that hour on Sunday morning that is putting them in a higher level of leadership, but is helping you and is helping the ministry as a whole? Does that make sense?
So you're saying even as a high capacity person, if they were taking a part of the role that you have, they would be problem solving and fixing and resourcing people or whatever, instead of just an assistant in a classroom.
Yeah, absolutely.
Match what their abilities are.
Absolutely. We get caught, I'm not talking over somebody, right? We get caught sometimes in thinking I'm the paid, and I don't know if all of y'all are paid or just love Jesus a whole lot and are doing this out of the kindness of your heart.
It's actually both.
Both. That's awesome. You guys are my heroes. But we sometimes get caught in, I'm the leader, so I have to do it all, and it's not fair of me to put any of that on somebody else. And I don't think that's biblical. You know, Ephesians talks about how our job is to equip the saints. And so even if that high capacity volunteer just means I move, and I don't know where you are in your ministry, but what I hear a lot of people say is, you know, I'm teaching children's church and I'm teaching this and I'm teaching that, and they are the main leader of the ministry. Even if creating a high capacity volunteer means I move out of a huge teaching role and I trust somebody else to do that. And that's not a huge time commitment, right? That's preparing and then that Sunday morning. But again, it goes back to helping them catch the vision and get excited about it for them to be willing to invest that time. I hope that helps some.
It does. It kind of gives me
It does.
a follow-up question. Do I have time for?
Yeah, go ahead.
A follow-up question would be, I have a high capacity leader who is about to step down. somebody else is, it's hard to find somebody that make that same time commitment where it worked for 3 to 5 years and now they're gone. So how do you combat that as well?
You don't let them leave. You tie them down. I'm just kidding. Right. Remember what I said in the very beginning, that the recruiting never stops, and that's one of the hardest part of children's ministry. Like, it never, ever, ever ends, because people have lives and move on and do other things. So I totally hear you. Yes, that is hard, and I wish there was a magic easy button for that. I'm facing that this next fall as well. One of my leaders is having a baby. What is she thinking? And she wants to step back for a little bit. So part of what we can do proactively is that pipeline idea that I mentioned about, is always get ourselves in a place where we're always thinking about who's next, right? And that's so hard in children's ministry because we're just trying to get all the spots filled in. But thinking ahead of, what leaders do I have right now that eventually could take that next high capacity spot? Who do I see potential in? And let's get ahead of it. I know that doesn't help you right now, but let's get ahead of it and start training people, whether it's they shadow somebody for a while, or we're just trying, we're thinking of that next level down is preparing for the next level up. And so whether we do that through our training, whether we do that through shadowing and coaching, how are we continually helping people move through that pipeline? Now, that doesn't help you right now. Right now, you got to pray real hard, and you got to see what leaders do you have that could be there. Maybe they're not ready to step into that role tomorrow, but maybe I know that God has somebody there that you can coach up into that position, even if it's going to take a while, and there's no way they can replace somebody who's been there 3 to 5 years. They're out there. This sounds so Sunday school, but God, the scripture says, Jesus says, the harvest, I'm not doing well on quoting anything verbatim today. I apologize for that. The harvest is white. Pray to the Lord of the harvest to send the workers that we need. And I know that's one of our favorite verses in children's ministry, right? But I took that literally this semester or this spring, and I put a reminder in my phone that 9 o'clock every day, something flashes up on my phone to pray to the Lord of the harvest. That sounds so Sunday school, and I'm not just trying to tell you, Jesus and pray about it, but we so often neglect those very simple, basic truths. So every day I'm praying at 9 o'clock that God would provide the leaders that we need. And so, I'm trusting that God has somebody there that is going to replace that leader that's been so invaluable to you. And so just look for who has that potential and who you can coach up.
And it'd be right as the minister that you're praying for that. Who else would be praying for that? So
absolutely.
I think it's a great idea, a practical idea of putting it as a reminder in your phone every day. Now, I would say it'd be great if we could enlist all these high capacity people, but they don't exist. No, really, they don't exist.
Right.
So when someone steps out of that, we may have to divide that down into things that are more manageable.
That's a great thought.
So it might take 2 people to do what one person did
Absolutely.
before. Although that stinks to have to find 2 people
right.
instead of just 1, but we could probably get it accomplished.
Yeah, absolutely.
Different strategy. Hey, thanks so much for your time. You have been
you guys.
a blessing.
The opportunity.
I think what's so great is just to hear from someone who is doing this and living in these aches and pains just like we are. Am I right? And these are excellent questions. I was writing them all because I need to ask them of myself. And what's really challenging is I have some of my own teachers in the room right now hearing this. And they're like, yep, Mark, nope.
Right? That's great.
I've been a little worried about that.
That's great.
Okay. Thank you, Jenny. We appreciate you and all you do.
Thank you, guys. God bless you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.